Good afternoon. So we'll try that again. I'm a principal of a school, so call and response is extremely important to me. Good afternoon. If everybody can please sit up, put your hands on your knees, close your eyes for a second, breathe through your nose and out through your mouth as you hear the next few words. Please keep your eyes closed. Imagine a child who was born to a prostitute who has 2 kids by 2 different men by the age of 20. Imagine a child who experiences mental, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse countless times while growing up in the worst social welfare system in our nation. Now imagine a child who sees its sibling admitted to a mental institution. Imagine another child who experiences their sibling being killed. Now open your eyes and look around. Somebody in this room has experienced one or some of these scenarios. Well, unfortunately, I've experienced all of them. My adverse childhood experiences score is a solid 10 out of 10. But I don't tell you that story today for sympathy, because I'm also Benjamin Williams, PhD. I'm the principal of Ron Brown College Preparatory High School. I'm the godfather to 2 amazing young people. I am the guardian of an awesome 17-year-old young man, and I'm the companion of a vicious lion killer that's right behind me. You all are lying. Why are you laughing? He's a lion killer. Seriously, he's a scary beast, all right? All jokes aside, I'm here today to talk about why, your why. See, your why is not always going to be grounded in what you want. Your why is going to be grounded in your fundamental belief of how you can change the world. Your why is a gift to ensure that at least one person's life is changed because of you. Your why is not always going to be immediately clear. Many times you're going to resist your why. But when you do know and own your why, dive in head first, 1,000%. I was all in for a bold endeavor that I knew was going to change the educational landscape of Washington, D.C. Our current mayor and one of our former chancellors had this idea to create a resource to empower young men of color in this city. Because at that time, 19% of young men of color were reading on grade level. 48% of young men of color were graduating high school within 4 years. 16% of young men of color who were leaving to 4 years institutions were graduating within 5 years. And today, as a young man of color growing up in this city, you're more likely to go to jail than you are to go to college. That's my why. Prior to the opening of our school, the ACLU campaigned vigorously against the opening of a single-sex public high school targeting a specific population. According to them, it was discriminatory and biased. But as I stated earlier, we just wanted to be an additional resource to the landscape. The 10 years prior to me applying to this position, I had been doing research, leading professional developments around the idea that drastic changes were needed to the K-12 institution to address young men of color. When I had the chance to open this school, I knew that the institution alone was not going to put a dent in the school-to-prison pipeline, because our culture had to be different. Our expectations had to be high and consistent. The people that I got on the bus with me to lead this work had to be prepared and ready to go. And the individual approach to the young man had to be revolutionary. We also had to make sure that the school was grounded in something different. We made sure that it was grounded in restorative justice, advocacy, ownership, self-belief, voice, and social change. Now, as an adult, transitioning to a space like that when you're accustomed to a punitive school environment could be extremely difficult. You know those schools that say, if you do X, then the consequence is Y. We wanted to make sure that every young man that walked through our doors understood that their voices should never, ever be suppressed. We wanted to make sure that they understood that they should advocate for themselves, that they can become young men of high character, that you can learn to own your behaviors, that you can become a lifelong learner, and you will be an agent of change. So some of you already have done your Google search and know that we were followed by NPR and we became podcast famous a few years ago. But for those of you that do not know, we allowed, in our first year, 2 reporters from NPR to follow us around every day. That means that when I walked into the building, when I went into a meeting, when I came out of the bathroom, there was a boom mic in my face somewhere. But what they saw and were able to report on is that we were struggling, that there was a lot of pain, that there were tears, but they also saw the successes. And I did all of this as a first-year principal. Anybody that ever moves into a position of leadership, do not ever let the media into your space for your first year, because there's a lot of struggles, trust me. I did a lot of things that I would now look back on, I'm like, wow, yeah, you shouldn't have done that. But what they saw was that our community was about holding everybody accountable, right? You had to own your participation in the harm. You had to own your emotions. You had to speak on your emotions. And then you had to be collaborative with the individual who may have caused you harm to be solution-oriented to ensure that the harm didn't happen again. To make a long story short, we were empowering young men to use their voices instead of responding in a hyper-masculine way that society teaches them. We wanted to make sure that the circle occurred, because in a circle, everybody can see each other. Nobody is greater than another person. Nobody is less than another person. Everybody's voice is heard and valued. And at the end of the day, the circle could last 1 hour or it can last 5 hours. And as one of our young men in our first year so eloquently put it, he was very eloquent when he said this, y'all always trying to restore some shh. Now, one circle that I remember vividly involved Jay, our mental health team, who we call our care team, our assistant principals, and myself. The circle had 2 reasons. One, we wanted to celebrate Jay, because according to Jay, he had never had a birthday party before. But the other thing we wanted to do was have a hard conversation about Jay's future. You see, at that time, Jay was a 17-year-old ninth grader who, in our first semester of our first year, had done nothing to gain credits towards graduation. Jay was doing harm to himself and his future. But in that circle was one of the most authentic conversations I had with a young person. Jay told us, because of our school, it was the first time that he actually enjoyed going to school because he knew that somebody cared for him. Because of our culture, Jay felt confident in himself. And because of the people that he had met at the school, he felt comfortable asking for help. And then he looked everybody in their eyes and asked us to help him graduate high school. Now, unfortunately, not all circles have a happy ending, but they start the conversation. And for our young men in our school, that's a step in the right direction, because they're just that, young men. Young men who are still learning, young men who are still going to make mistakes, and many of their mistakes are going to be age appropriate. As adults, we learn that it is our responsibility to educate, not to continue to perpetuate the criminalization of young men of color. We wanted to give them it was our job to give them the skills to be productive citizens, however they choose, not a statistic. History says that a big reaction is caused by bold and courageous change. Change to systems such as the school-to-prison pipeline, because that's a civil rights issue. Change to the unequitable funding for K-12 education, because that's a human rights issue. Change to the decrease of young men of color who are graduating high school and college, because that's an extinction issue. And all of these issues need to be addressed. Now appease me one more time. If I can get everybody to sit up again. Put your hands on your knees again. Close your eyes. Breathe through your nose and out through your mouth. As you hear these words from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was talking to the servants of the civil rights movement, and at the same time, think about your why. If you cannot fly, then run. If you cannot run, then walk. If you cannot walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, never stop moving forward. Now open your eyes and go out there and cause a big reaction in this small world. Thank you.